Okay, so it says we're live right now. So if Josh, you could just give me a heads up when we are live, and then we'll get going with the meetup.
So I can hear your audio on YouTube, so we're good.
Cool. Okay, so thanks for sticking with us. We were only a minute late, so thank you for hanging on there. Of course, this is the first digital remote meetup, and we just wanted to kind of try and get something set up that we can do on a more frequent basis, just get developers from around the area just showing off what they're currently up to, and kind of just we'll deep dive in there. So hopefully, first time using OBS, first time streaming live. Hopefully all this goes okay. But Josh, I'm sure you can jump in if people can't see things. So the schedule, we always try to provide value, and we want these meetups to be informative, and so that people can kind of share useful tips, tricks, ideas. And so we've kind of put seven together for ourselves from this call. It may be things that people know, but even if you find that one little extra nugget that you can use in your development, hopefully that can speed up your workflow. And then we'll be sharing TryHard Interactive's editor of the Otterman Empire that they just shipped. And they'll be kind of digging us into the code, into the blueprints, into the art. Chris is going to be sharing his screen, and he was the art director on the project. So hopefully a lot of useful information. And even then we'll move on to the experience of shipping games, and especially in this kind of climate, how it is to ship your first video game, especially on multiple platforms, which I couldn't even imagine the intensity required there. So really hope that'll be a fun conversation for everyone to listen in on. And then what we've done in the Discord, so for people that are actually part of the meetup group, if you want to put some suggestions in the Discord channel, and I think it's the suggestions channel, and we can actually open up separate voice channels for people to be chatting about. So I kind of wanted to jump into, we've already got a few suggestions in place, but these are prompts. So, if you're interested in VR and AR, if you're here to kind of chat to other VR and AR developers, feel free to kind of jump in there and chat about the things that you're working on. 4.25, it's on the roadmap right now. Is there something that you're specifically waiting for? Are there certain features and elements of the engine that you're putting into your own games? And Chris and Simran, could you just mute yourself on Discord, please? And then there's also virtual production. There's something I'm super interested in on the virtual production side, but is anyone else in the chat interested in virtual production? I don't know. I've not started with it, but it'd be fun to chat to people. Photogrammetry, if we're trying to figure out ways to create more sustainable pipelines, these are the type of things that developers are thinking about right now. And then also next gen UE5, I'm sure I'm with everyone in the chat in saying that as soon as we saw the stream go live and we saw the video, definitely our work studio Slack was just chatting and talking about all the excitement and the features, and especially with the next gen platforms, just opens up so many opportunities for development. So if people are interested in that, we can open up a voice chat for that. So hopefully this should run just until 6. We don't want to take up too much of people's evenings, but then after that it's just more casual, informal chat. So if you've not spoken to someone in a while, with us all being remote, we don't necessarily get the interactions there, especially with events like EGX cancelled. So hopefully it's just a nice casual space to chat to people in. So hopefully you'll find at least one of these 7 tips and tricks useful. If you're not already currently using it, I know as I was researching, I found something out, so always useful. This is something that one of our animators, Harry, found, and it's a game changer, because when you're working in sequencers, I don't know how many developers here are using Sequencer in their Unreal projects, but for us, we have loads of different sequences across different maps, and especially, an animator trying to say, okay, how do I check this in the level? Like, because when you open the sequencer, it's unreferenced a bunch of assets. You may not be able to play it directly, and then you have to figure out, like, where is this from? Now, it's just in the right click menu, but how many times do you just skip over things that you never even need to pay attention to? So if you just right click on a sequencer asset, go right to the top, it's the first option, open map, and it actually opens the map from where that sequencer was created. Super useful tip, but I didn't know that. This is something that NJR Audio Designer uses, and when you're working with loads of sound cues or loads of textures or anything in the engine that requires editing like the same property on many assets, people may already know about this. I think it's been in for a while. It might have even been in for UE3. People can familiarize myself, update me on that if I'm incorrect there, but right click asset actions, bulk edit property matrix. You can select 50 sound cues, for example, or WAVs, shall I say, right click, edit, and tick them all to be looping, for example. And so you don't have to load up each one, click looping, go on to the next one, and so forth. This is something that I like to do in my editor, and this is more for level designers / environment artists, just checking content in the levels. Collision issues are some of the worst, not the worst, but some of the most frustrating issues to be dealing with in games. And so just having hotkeys set up for the player collision and the visibility collision is always super useful. So what I do is I go to the keyboard and shortcuts, and I just type in collision, and it brings up the first two options there. And I just assign player collision to Z and visibility collision to X, just because, on the keyboard, they're at the bottom left, they're where your fingers already are. And it's just a straightforward, quick toggle to just check, is there a massive box collision here that I just wasn't familiar with? So always useful to set up. This is, I'm very sad to say that I had no idea this was here. So if anyone's ever been editing a blueprint and your construction script has just disappeared, people know that you can't go to window and find the construction script there. And I always just used to close the blueprint and open it again. But, on the left-hand side, it says construction script there, and you can just find your construction script. Now, that's a super easy tick box, but again, I just wasn't aware of that. So double-clicking on that, you can get your construction script back. And we were having a design review last week, I think. And, when we're working with many streaming levels and you have actors across different levels, some people aren't as familiar with like how to move actors across the different levels. And so generally what I do, and I'm sure what a lot of developers do, is just double click the level in the levels tab to have it marked as your persistent level. And you can just hit Control and M on your keyboard, so you can select 20 different assets and you can just move them onto that level. So it's just a really quick and clean way. If you right click the asset, go to levels and open that sub menu up, you can see move selection to current level, and there's a hotkey there for Control and M. So it might be that people just keep using that menu, they may not be using shortcuts, but if you weren't using that shortcut before, hopefully it saves you a few seconds every day there. This is one of Chris's, who's presenting on the stream in a second. But just to make sure people are familiar with material instances, if you're not currently using it in the pipeline, like hopefully a lot of developers are, but it's just making sure that, when you have that material as a master property and you want to change a bunch of variables, it's almost like, you don't just want to duplicate that material lots of times, because, it's just a heavier version to use in your engine as well. So just right click the material, create an instance from that material, and you can edit different properties per instance. So I'm sure lots of people in the chat know about this. However, if that's a new kind of pipeline or a new way of working for you, definitely just go and research that, because you should be using it in your pipeline. Now, this is something that I learned today, which mind blown. So the documentation, if you search blueprint bookmarks, there's a whole page of documentation on this. Now, my original tip was that, especially if you're a designer or an environment designer, level designer or environment designer, we quite frequently fly around our levels, and at different points in the level, we hit Control and number 1 on our keyboard, for example, and that sets a bookmark in your editor, so that whenever you press the num key, number 1, it snaps to that view, so it can almost set like chapters or bookmarks from the view throughout the level. So that's tip number 1. If people aren't currently using that, definitely include that into your level creation process, because if you're constantly just trying to fly around different areas of the level, that can get super annoying. Whereas if you just assign 1 to 9 and even the 0 key to different parts of the level, you can just quickly snap there. So that's the first thing, which we use quite frequently, but I did not realize there was blueprint bookmarks. So I only learned this today, so I won't pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but it's super useful and super powerful. I dug into a little bit, but you're best just checking the documentation on that, because you can actually set bookmarks inside of blueprints as well, so you can quickly reference them. So definitely, if you weren't aware of that, like myself, definitely go and check that out. So I'm going to be making these PowerPoints available. I believe it is also a link in the YouTube stream as well. But if anyone wants to submit a tip or a trick or anything that they want to share with the rest of the community, just fill out the Google form, and you can. We'll make sure we host it on the next meetup. So now I wanted to hand over to Chris and Simran. So I will be asking questions, and we're just trying to deep dive in. Again, if there are any questions in the editor, then we can get them addressed. I've got my chat screen open below me, so if you see me looking down, I'm looking at the chat, and we will try to answer any questions that come up. But did you want to introduce yourself? Well, I can see Simran on the screen now, so Simran, you might as well go ahead and introduce yourself first. Oh, Simran, you're still muted as well, sorry, in Discord, so you might want to unmute in Discord. There we go, got you.
Hello, I'm Simran. I'm one of the directors and the community manager on the Otterman Empire. Pleasure to be here.
Cool, thanks for that, Simran. And then also Chris, I believe you should be there as well.
Do you see me?
Yeah, perfect. Got your face there.
Hello.
Excellent.
Yeah, very glad to be here. I'm also one of the directors at TryHard and was the lead art director, I guess, for the Ottoman.
Cool. So, I mean, did you just want to take us on a little fly around the editor? I'm sure you've kind of highlighted a few things that you wanted to kind of show people on how they're set up. But yeah, kind of take it away and just show us around the world.
Yeah, I can. As I said, I've written down this outline of what I thought might work, but looking at it, I'm probably going to wing it just to see what works and what doesn't. So the idea behind the game was originally to create a party shooter. It was always going to be an arena-based shooter, and the reasons behind that was because we're very inexperienced. Right? This is literally our first game, and that's going to become very obvious as I take you through the meat and potatoes. That's the whole thing.
I think just to jump in there, Chris, though, that is every developer in this chat, right? Like, we're always finding new ways to kind of improve our workflows, and you always do things better, but at some point you just got to ship. So no doubt you guys are already ahead of where you're currently demonstrating.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just good to see how things are made.
And that's one of the reasons I might understand on a bit of a negative in terms of how the levels are constructed, but you'll see what I mean when I get into it. So this is literally our first level that we ever made. Yeah, and it's quite simple. It doesn't look that complex, but there's a few issues with it. But I'll get into how it's constructed first of all. So we designed all the levels around our diving mechanic, which is the rivers. If you're not familiar with the game, it's a bit like Splatoon. You've got to come into one of the rivers and dive under it to refill your jetpack and your ammo. So, with that in mind, if I get hold of this mesh, so this you anybody who's familiar with it, shipped a few games before, might recognize a problem immediately. So, if I open this, yeah. So this is our levels was constructed as essentially one big asset originally, which come to find out towards at the end of the project is a big no because it introduces a lot of performance issues in the name of draw calls and overdraw. As we see here, this whole thing is nearly 65k vertices, which is quite a lot, and we've got we've got 11 different element material IDs, which means it's giving us 12 draw calls at all times. And because it's so big, it's pretty much there is no way it's not going to be rendered at all times, which is a bit of a problem. So ideally, what we should have done, and again, this is all hindsight 2020. These should have been individual assets, and we should have we should have split this up into sections. So if you imagine it, kind of hard to demonstrate it. If you imagine it like a pie chart or whatever you want to call it, and we split it off into like segments. This segment gets rendered. This segment gets rendered. That segment gets rendered. In theory, it's a lot more draw calls, but it also means anytime that that particular section is not on camera, then it's not going to get rendered.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance there, isn't there? Because I presume the reason why you did it this way is just because you had like a Maya workflow, and you just thought, right, I'm just going to make the level in Maya and then import it into Unreal, and there's less mock-up in the engine. And there's potentially benefits to having these larger chunks that you're talking about. Obviously, if the whole level loads in, it causes a bit of slowdown, but at least you're not trying to render loads of different draw calls. So, it's the balance. And I was just curious how that did you find more problems on Switch doing larger meshes, or did larger groups of meshes actually work out better on that kind of platform?
It's a bit of both. I'll show you how we went. How we fixed that with the later levels, because I had to actually leave this one alone because we had to, as an optimization technique, we had to eliminate shadows on Switch just so we could get it running at a decent frame rate, which was a bit of a shame. And that wouldn't be too much of a problem if this whole map wasn't, if the UVs weren't such a mess. So the issue here is none of these assets, because it's all one big asset, none of them are UV'd. So that means we can't have a light map. So if I come into the city, for example, so if I eliminate the shadows, is that one? That means the whole level looks a lot more flat because there's no UVs for a light map. So that's one of the biggest sacrifices we had to make. Now, ideally, I would have liked to have remade this level like I did with a lot of other assets, but we just ran out of time. We just had to ship. So from that, I can open one of the levels. Sorry, that I did. Where is the Mayan, which is one of my favorites. Probably should have renamed that to something else. But yeah, there we go. I'm praying it doesn't crash. I know it's gonna. It was on a spline. I'll show you that one in a second. 1 sec. So yeah, this is the Mayan. This is where we had to. I had to, instead of instancing meshes, which I couldn't work out how to do. properly because I didn't understand it enough, and I kind of still don't. So I opted for the merge assets option. So originally, this big setup here, everything was all individual assets. So, and they all had their own texture maps and everything like that. So I had to essentially condense all of this into a modular single texture map, and all these little bricks, I mean, including all these little bricks with their own assets. So I was getting tons of draw calls just from this one setup here. So you imagine all these little bricks have got their own little light maps, and it still causes us some problems there, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I had to immensely cut down everything into a single modular texture as much as possible. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave that there.
What
So
were the
in
kind
re-
of little I see little actors placed around the world? So I see things like you know the I guess they're spawn arrows. Could you just take us through what the different blueprints are, just dotted around your level as like markup?
Yeah. Can you see Simran there, by the way?
Yeah, Simran, did you want to disable your video maybe on Skype, and that might bring Chris's face up?
I don't mind. I don't care about my face. I just don't want it obstructing the viewers. So yeah, there is a lot of actors, and I will be honest, I don't know the ins and outs of all of them, but I will demonstrate what I can. So one of the things we tried to do was be as efficient as possible. So we have a single player campaign and a multiplayer function. For the single player campaign, we had these things. We had to create some sort of enemy types. We're talking like simple drones you can shoot, turrets the player can shoot. A lot of these actors, and we also had these things called hazards, which we felt were essential for a party play shooter. Just to each level has its own hazard that goes on, just to vary up the game. If we look, here we go. So the spline. So here's the spline. These actors only initiate during the single player portion, so you won't be able to see these in the multiplayer. If I bring up it's kind of hard to demonstrate without actually being in the actual game. A sec. You know what? Actually, instead of doing that, it will be much more simpler, I think, to open our new dev room. This is a recent addition to the project, which I'm quite ashamed to say. We should have had this from day one, really. But, you know, you live and you learn. Oh, it's been crazy. There's positives and negatives that people have taken to it generally well, though. I'm just happy it's out there. You know, I was never really worried about how people would receive it, because at the end of the day, I'm just happy people get to play it, because we knew from MGU that people would enjoy it. We always knew that. It was just a matter of
you guys play tested a lot, didn't you?
Yeah, it was just a matter of being able to actually get there. It's a bit rough around the edges, yeah, but I knew from people playing at MGU that the general reception was pretty good. So here we go. Yeah. So for the, I've lost input there. Let's try again. Okay. So yeah, so in regards to the rivers you were talking before, they are spline based. So if we, there it is. So the whole thing is spline based. So it's including the mesh. If I can go to it for you. So it works on the construction script.
So is the gameplay code housed in there as well? It doesn't seem like there's too much code going on, or is that just a wrapper on top of that?
I'm honestly not too sure how to answer that question, to be honest. This was one of the very first things we made.
Yeah, it seems like the construction script set up to kind of make a spline, duplicate the mesh instances along the spline. And, when you see one of the characters jump into the water and kind of teleport over to somewhere else, I presume that's then a separate actor that you place on top of the water then to kind of make it functional, maybe?
No, so for the diving mechanic, so I think it works on the original idea. It works on collision spheres throughout the whole actor. Each spline point would have its own collision sphere, and then it would detect. It would detect when the character was on, and then you could dive on it. Really, I'm sorry to say, I really don't know how we've done it yet, to be honest. Because, as I said, this is one of the very first things we did. We're talking 3 years ago. So
It's good to see that it lasted, though. I mean, you made it
yeah,
once, and then you kept it. You shipped with it.
I think it might be a tag or something, to be honest. But functionally, you can just see. So we come to character, you put your dive under. Now, one thing to bear in mind here, the character isn't actually gone. It's just the way we animate it. So for a lot of the animations, we use animate them in place. So we recommend, I didn't know about root motion at the time. So I thought just stick to what you know, stick to what you can do, and just animate as best you can.
So did you guys have an animator on the team? Or
no.
So,
so go on.
So who was it? Was it you animating everything, or?
Yeah, so I essentially did all the characters, at least at the start anyway. I did all the characters at the start, and then towards the end of the project, I had to move into like environment art and things like that. And that's where I started learning about more optimizations and things in a similar vein. It was a lot to take on. Because I was still learning, the characters aren't quite as polished as I wanted to, but that's because I had to do 8 different characters on 8 different skeletons.
And how long did they take then?
I think originally I budgeted a month for each character, like a week for each stage, and then eventually I got that stage down as I learned how to reuse certain assets. So we're talking things like I was able to reuse the characters. I was able to reuse the Astrid's mesh quite a lot. If I can actually show you. Whatever, if I could spell it. Where's my skeletal meshes? Got so many meshes. So yeah, Astrid was pretty much the basis for all the characters. So I had high poly ZBrush sculpts that would use as the base, and then I would duplicate all that mesh. I'd duplicate that mesh and make all the clothing assets around it. So for Tico, I get for our other character. Excuse me. There it is. That's the one. So he's essentially just a modified Astrid model. So once I had the low poly asset for Astrid, I even kept the same UVs and everything, just so I could recycle as many assets as I could, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to recycle the animations. So I decided to reuse as many of the assets as I could, in terms of the meshes.
And then, did you know you needed to do that from the start, or is it something you learned? And I guess I'm trying to get to like the things that you're taking with you into the next thing that you're working on. Is that how much of your workflow changed from when you just first started the game into now, essentially?
A lot of it actually did. It's mostly in terms of texturing, because I felt I had to cut a few corners in some respects, because a lot of early on it was a lot of ZBrush work, a lot of high poly sculpting, and that was good. But at the end of the day, I realized that the only reason you do ZBrush is to get the normal map, get all your detail map, and then you bake it onto a low poly map. So in the end, I just started hand painting that stuff in Substance Painter. So like, if I wanted any, say, panel lining or anything like that, I would just detail it in Substance Painter straight away. So I just felt that cut down my workload immensely, and it helped me make more content. And I'm still doing that now to a certain respect. It's not like I can't do it. It's just it was a case of, do I need to do it? Can I achieve the same or similar results by doing this method?
Yeah, I guess. What would you recommend? Because it seems like you pretty much touched any kind of visual element on the screen. You kind of had a hand in that, if that's fair to say. What for small teams that don't necessarily have their dedicated character animator or even character artist, would you say it's worth people trying to pick it up and just learn it, or would you say, in hindsight, just contract it out? Or like, because character animation and character creation is quite a large element, especially if you've never made a game before. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say learn it, because I've learned, speaking of a personal, just from a personal perspective, I've learned so much over the last 3 years. I'm a lot more confident, and it's in my own ability, and I'm also able to assist in other areas because I've been able to rig. I'm not rigging just characters anymore. I'm rigging other props and things like that. So and I'm also able to, because I've picked up environment art now, I'm able to understand it more, and I'm able to pass on what I've learned to another artist who I could be working with in the future. So it's daunting, no doubt, when you've got to learn everything pretty much. But I think it's a worthwhile journey. Speaking from things that I would have done differently, if I was able to do what I'm in again, knowing what I know now, speaking from the character perspective, I would have just focused on strictly otters. Because one of the issues we had was not only
is that a rig from a rig perspective, or
yeah. So this is one of our more interesting rigs. Let's get an animation line. Come on, which one? There it is. That's the one. There we go. So this is one of our more complex characters. Can I get you scaling actually? Oh, don't do that. It's terrifying. So he's got quite a unique rig, and there was no way I'd be able to reuse any animations across any other characters because he's got such a unique rig. Now, that being said, I was able to get quite a lot of mileage out of this one rig, in terms of like new characters coming later that I might be able to show later. I might not. We'll see. So, and our final boss character is actually pretty much a duplicate of this guy. It's Tico in just one of these mechs. Can I just why don't I just get him up? Sure, no, I want the BP. BP. Which one? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, there we go. So essentially, I was able to reuse a lot of assets with him. So yeah, just by I was able to kit bash a lot of different elements together. Just which saved me some time. Just saved me some time.
Cool. Are there any other elements of the 3D you wanted to kind of draw attention to? Anything that you specifically learned on the project that you thought might be cool for people to know creating any of these types of games?
I think the major one I wanted to highlight was the material instances, because it saved me so much work. If I'm down here, so each character has like 10 different skins at least. Right, we're adding more constantly. So if you go down here, that means 10 different materials. We've got 8 characters to start with, So that's 80 different material sets. We got another 2 coming in. They have 10 skins. So that's we got 100 different materials for each different character. That's where material instances really came into their own. Can I show you? Get out of the way. So yeah, so if I bring up the master, actually, let's bring the master up. Maybe. So it's fairly simple in terms of how it's structured. So you get the emissive, plug it into base color, roughness, occlusion, and metallic. It's pretty standard. The only difference is we converted all these to parameters, which means we can change the standard texture on the fly, and it will reflect immediately on the character on the mesh it's used for. It also meant that we are able to update and add functions into the material itself as and when we needed. We've got this is a material for when the character dies. We needed some sort of visuals that for when the character died, they wouldn't just disappear, because that if we just hid them, it would look pretty cheap. So we had we put in like this dissolve effect. If I can bring it up here, so the dissolve amount. I check that to point. It's too much. There you go. You can see it now. If I come back to the character. So this was a fairly late addition to the material, and if I had to add this function in to 100 different materials over and over again, I probably would have just quit the project right there, because that would have been way too much. So by doing it in the material instance with this as the master, just when you save and applied it, it applied this function to every single material instance. So every single character would automatically get this, which saved us a ton of time. One downside is when you make any slight change in here for whatever reason, the whole thing has to recompile, and it'll have to recompile every single shader. But I think we all know. I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah, and I even saw, I don't know, for those in the stream that saw the kind of UE5 stream a couple of weeks ago, but when they were talking about the features, they were talking about no compile times for shaders, and that's coming into the editor. So yeah, that'll, like, when you load up a new project after you've not compiled shaders, that can take a little bit of time, can't it?
Yeah, and also for one of the optimizations we made for Switch was trying to simplify the shaders as much as possible. This is probably a really tiny saving in hindsight, but when you're strapped and you need every little bit, you do whatever you can. So we introduced a quality switch, a node here, which basically says when your material is using high, medium, or low, it'll use this. So we, instead of to default, well, we put it on, we just leave it as normal, and for a switch, we set the material quality to low. So instead of using this texture and requiring another texture lookup, it uses a constant that we put in, just to simplify it.
Yeah, that's really nice, and I think I saw James in the chat before, and I know Dave's in the chat as well, but I'm not sure we've used that, and we've of course not shipped anything on Switch or anything like that. But yeah, they're always useful little tips and tricks to know, aren't they? Especially for like shipping your first game on Switch. I can't even imagine the amount of performance headaches you guys might have had.
It was quite a big ask, especially when we were building the game. We never had access to the dev kit itself, which
interesting.
Which is probably not a good thing. By the time we got a dev kit, we realized what we were in for. So yeah, that was a fun few months.
I mean, moving on to that kind of just launch and just try hard in general. And Simran, I don't know if you want to jump in, but like you mentioned just before the call that, you know, the headaches that you guys had whilst just trying to ship, and just any of those fun little developer stories that kind of happen. I know mentioning James and Dave in the chat, I remember we didn't have a fast enough internet connection in our studio for launching our first game, Ether 1. And I think it was me and James. We had to manually carry a computer upstairs to an apartment above and plug it into their router to upload the build to Steam, because Steam kept dropping. I think we have video footage of it as well. But it's those fun little things that happen. So I was just wondering, is there anything from you guys that, you know, the last couple of weeks were just like, how did that even happen? Like, was there any things that were just big learning experiences for you?
So obviously we've had a global pandemic to contend with, so that's been a very, very unique way to launch a game.
Did you want to switch your video on as well, Simran? Sorry to interrupt.
There we go. Apologies about that. One of the big things I say was launching a game during a global pandemic, and launching a game when you can't even have the whole team in one room was definitely a task within itself. We had the internet crash 5 minutes, same as to yourself, 5 minutes before we hit the upload button on Steam. So that was that was a big one. The whole team kind of panicking, going, "What's happening?
We can't even launch."
Yeah, and obviously you kind of have the limitations, like, you know, the whole team can't be together, so you can't do those kind of last minute checks that you kind of really, really need to be doing as a team. And, you know, that whole kind of responsibility fell
just to clarify, in addition to that as well, one of the big things for me was QA. Because of the pandemic, we weren't able to do as much QA as we wanted to. So it was that was not fun.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We obviously, because the result of that has been, you know, kind of a few bugs that we could have easily have spotted, and a few little things like little features, like how the hell did we miss those sort of things on launch? People else, like, even just like, for an example, we launched the game with the VR mode enabled, Steam VR not enabled.
Yeah, I think we might have done something along that. Something along those lines. So it happens to everyone.
Yeah, so in terms of like major hiccups, there wasn't anything like major, because we kind of already got all the pieces sort of in place for launch. It was just kind of like, you know, little obstacles in the way that were stopping us all being in the same room together. So kind of like quality of assurance and to check things, obviously, because the lead programmer and myself couldn't be in the same room. So you kind of didn't have the communication between the lead programmer and the environment artist and the community manager with the creative director, whereas it was all kind of online. We were having to launch a game on Slack. So, but in terms of the actual launch of the game itself, we didn't have any major hiccups. We've mainly had hiccups throughout development, which I'm sure anyone who's followed the development of the Otterman Empire knows. It's been a hell of an experience, needless to say.
Yeah, I mean, literally jumping on that. I mean, I think I'm not sure if the entire team did, but you all graduated from FutureWorks in Manchester, didn't you? And so what was that experience? I mean, we no doubt have students in the chat that have graduated from similar universities, University of Central Lancashire, FutureWorks, the different games courses around the country. Is there anything do you say to students, definitely just dive in and just try it out and see what happens? Or like, what's your advice when students ask you about forming small teams?
Yeah, for sure. So we all graduated from the same course as well at FutureWorks Game Design. I was second year. Chris, Bradley Mayo and Kieran Rogers were all third years at the time. But the big thing for us is that being young students, that you sort of don't realise is that video game development is completely different to what you learn at university. So we kind of came up with the idea of, let's make a Splatoon meets Overwatch meets like Mario Kart-esque sort of mashup. Let's have it online. And we were a bunch of students at the time and practically didn't know anything about video game development. And then when you started making a real product for the first time, you start learning things like getting online is not as easy as it sounds. There's huge costs involved in that. Like learning how to optimize a game, getting dev kits so that you can actually learn how to launch a game on multiple platforms, because it's all well and good making a PC game that's very well polished, but that game, you could have the most 60 frames per second title in the world, but it could run at 3 frames per second on Switch, which is one of the things that we did encounter. But so a piece of advice that I do offer is, we don't regret the game we made, because, you know, it's taught us a lot. Like, it's a big project, especially for your first project, launching a game on 3 different platforms. a party shooter with so much content in it. It's taught us a lot and why it's took 3 years to make. But one thing I do advise you is keep the scope of your first project kind of low, because, and the great thing I tell people is it's you can make these great ideas you've got later on, but, and this is quite a controversial quote we have in the studio, but it's making a game is easy, shipping it is the hard bit, because there's so many different aspects of shipping the game that just developers don't even realize it's coming, like setting up a Steamworks page, getting through certification, through lot checks, dealing with the business element of things. And what I kind of stress students is, even if you just want to launch on Steam, make a project for about 6 months just so you can learn how all these different systems, learn how lot check works, learn how setting up a Steam page works, so that way you can kind of get familiar with all this sort of stuff beforehand before you delve into like a really, really big project. Because obviously that's been a big learning experience for the whole team, and kind of why a part of why it took so long is just learning how to launch a game effectively.
Yeah, I think there's two things going on there. Is that you should definitely, and I don't necessarily think that's a controversial point. I think, yeah, I mean, it's not that making games is easy. It's a creative process that is fun and enjoyable to do. So you don't mind the hours that go into it and the kind of roadblocks and you figuring things out, because it's a creative pursuit. But then shipping the game, it's ticking boxes. It's just, why is this not working? Because this page is in an arbitrary place on this platform release site, and you just don't know, and it's just trying to figure out someone else's systems. And I think that's the hard part there. But also,
starting it is easy.
Go on, sorry, Chris. Yeah.
Starting it is easy. Finishing it is the real challenge.
Yeah.
I find anyway.
Yeah, and so
it's not to say like we don't want to put anybody off doing it. Like, absolutely do it if you really want to. Just understand that the advice you're being given doesn't come from a place of negativity. It comes from a place of realism.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the second point, which I think you guys did it right. It's that make a cool, interesting game that you're proud of. Don't just make something throwaway that you don't really care about. It needs to be interesting for at least you to develop, and something that you think other people will play. And like Chris was saying at the start, you guys play tested loads at Gamers Unite in Manchester, all these kind of events. It definitely helps build your community, and you need to be invested in that. You shouldn't just think of just a small project that you think, I'll just get it up and running, I'll ship it in 6 months, and then I can move on to the thing that I want to create. Because ultimately, if you don't see the success from that first thing that you created, even just as a throwaway thing, because if you're doing it just to ship something, why are people then going to invest their time and energy into picking up your game? So it needs to be something you're super passionate about, but at the same time, scope is a thing, and you need to make sure you rein that in. So I agree with you guys on that.
Yeah, it's just again, we did the big, we came out of university, let's make this big, massive game, and it's just learning those pitfalls and those ups and downs is just something that I really advise, because it's just such a worthy experience, just learning how to actually ship a game. And if you can just get through all the pitfalls of that first, so when you come to make your baby idea and this thing that you're super, super passionate about, you don't have to worry about the frustrations of that, and that gives you more time to focus on actual development and making this the best product that you can get it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And then, just recently you guys announced that you were part of the Epic Mega Grant stuff, so no doubt that's helped the studio kind of push forward and kind of, I know you may not specifically, it's very early on in terms of just launching a game, so you probably can't comment specifically, but like, how has that process been, and what does it allow you to do moving forward?
Oh, sure. So in terms of the grant itself, it came quite late into development, like towards the end. So we've actually put all those apologies. We've put those assets towards actually marketing the game, which is a big thing I was hoping to talk about in this presentation. Is something that game developers never think about unless they go through the traditional publisher route. Is marketing a game is one of the biggest things that you can do, and it is your lifeline effectively. And what we managed to do with that grant is effectively hire 2 individuals to assist with the marketing and basically selling the product. Caroline Watson, who specialises more in towards traditional PR and getting, like your magazine outlets, your podcasts. And then we had Dan Sheridan, who focused more on the influencer side of things, so getting YouTubers, Twitch streamers, previously Mixer players, all these things. developers just don't remember, like, because when you're making a game, you don't actually think about the marketing process of it, which is what I was going to touch upon in my presentation a little bit, is that one of the biggest things that I ask developers to do when they start, even just as early as day one of development, is start building a press list and start building your influencer list. Like, we got very lucky with the mega grant. We could afford someone who was able to assist myself, because that was kind of like one of my main areas in the project, is managing these different press outreaches and managing all these different relations. But relations management is such a big task, and just something as simple as going on Twitter. And the advice I give is, if you're a developer and you're a solo developer, or you're only a two-man developer, set aside 2 hours. If you don't have like a dedicated community manager and you're just like a solo developer, or whatever your circumstances are, unless you've got someone who can solely dedicate themselves to that task, set aside 2 hours a week just to scout Twitter, scout Facebook, scout anyone, journalists, Facebook groups, YouTubers. And I've got a little bit of something I can show, and obviously due to privacy laws I can't show too much of this, but I'm going to show you a little bit inside of how Tryhard categorizes our press list. Okay, as that works for you. Shared distribution. Don't worry, guys, it's just a massive Excel sheet, but the Excel thread. Okay, so as I said, due to privacy laws, I can't kind of show a lot of the, like down here, you'll be able to see like press list coverage. I can't kind of share that because it contains people's emails. But what you're seeing here is pretty much any producer, community managers, or anyone dealing with platforming or just in relations in general's best friend. So as you can see here, this is what I'm kind of trying and push people to like start building from day one, is start, getting a list of all the Reddits that are beneficial to your game, or communities will even talk about your game. So say if you're making a game where you've got to dress up a load of characters in silly outfits, join fashion groups. Don't just limit yourself to like Reddits that are specifically about gaming, and just start building up all these different lists of people on different publishing platforms, like you can see right, different publishing platforms, different Discords, Facebook groups, B2B, B2C events, groups, just basically anything that you can do. And one piece of advice I do like to say is just, the sooner you have this stuff, start integrating yourself into these communities as quick as possible, because even if you're in the early stages, if you dedicate 2 hours a week just to integrate into these communities, like just taking part in the discussions, posting stuff, you'll become a member of that community, and you'll find yourself, your posts will be generally more accepted, and not find yourself being outright banned, which is something I've learned along the way, is like, as you can see down here, banned from our gaming on Reddit, because, that was that.
How did you get banned from something?
Yeah, so obviously this is kind of like the rookie mistake I learned coming out of university, is I thought, I'll just go talk about the game, and people accept it. And, rule one of Reddit is they hate advertising, so you've got to like tailor the content that you're putting out there to different platforms, which, is a rookie mistake a lot of developers make when you're going into this, is you kind of think, people might just want to see the game, and I'll just post the same worded post on Facebook that I post onto Reddit, and Reddit will go, well, no, this is advertisement, banned. And you're just like, and then you've lost that vital resource. I say our games is, because our team also have other access to this, so we didn't lose this, but potentially that could have been a reach of 2 million members that I could have lost for our project. And that's kind of like one of the pitfalls of this sort of stuff that I like people to be aware of, is just start building this stuff now, is because when you come to launch a game, you'll have all these different people into coverage, press lists, all these different people that will just cover your games at launch, and that will eventually drive traffic to sales, drive traffic to your website. And it's all just about that publicity and just getting people from day one interested in your product. And as you can see here, this list is quite long in terms of communities and just people that I've integrated myself into.
I think a good thing to note as well, when people are making these, whether it's Google Sheets or something like that, something that is good to do is when you're reading game reviews or you're looking at magazines, it's not just writing the company, it's writing the person that wrote that article, because then you have a one-on-one connection with this person. When we're shipping our previous games, it's that if people were writing about similar games that we were creating, you can reach out and say, I really found this article specifically interesting. X, Y, and Z. You might find what we're working on interesting and make those early connections. And then in your Google spreadsheet, you can write the person's name and their email address. And a lot of freelance writers then have personal emails. And the reason why I say this is, we're getting our production time down a lot more now, but our first couple of games both took 4 years to make. 4 years and then 3 years, and then hopefully we're on 2 years now, but who knows. But either way, journalists move around, and so keeping those connections live, and so you have a personal name to connect with that outlet. And so, because you may have 2 or 3 different people from IGN, for example, or GameSpot, or the different outlets, but journalists and writers move around a lot, so having those things in mind, that's specifically on the editorial side. But then also in your Google Sheets, have a notes column as well, and just say, have 2 actually, have the last communicated date, so when you last reached out, maybe what the email thread was called, so you can refer back to that email thread, but also notes specifically about what they might be interested in. Like, here's Simran, he's interested in an Unreal Engine. And so if you just write small prompts to yourself in your Excel or Google Sheet, you can kind of trigger your brain to continue that conversation. So it helps make a one-on-one connection, because what you don't want to do is send out a mass email to 27 outlets as like a big press blast. You'd rather communicate individually, and that's definitely helped us, especially when you're a small team. Trying to make those personal emails is a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And relations is just kind of like the big thing. And I know a lot of developers kind of get scared of this, because, this is not something that is in the game developers manual. Like, this is sort of stuff that you kind of have to learn, which is why I kind of tell developers, depending on the size of your team, you don't have someone dedicated to this, and you're just on your own. Just 2 hours a week is like the magic number I found. Just, do it on a Sunday, or just a day where you're not really doing that much. Just isolate yourself for 2 hours and just find journalists, YouTubers, and don't rule out people with like 18 subscribers. Just get this big list of big to small, because one view is one view at the end of the day, and that one view could lead to a sale for your product.
Yeah.
So just take the time, just 2 hours a week, just to build up this big list, and you can do that from day one of development. You'll find that you have a reach of anything from 30 million to 100 million. Like, we started building our outreach sorts of like 6 months prior to the launch of the game, and we had a reach of 20 million by the end of that. So if you're making this game for say like a year, you could have double that. You could have 40 million, and that goes a huge way from just spending 2 hours a week just getting this list of people together. So yeah, I really urge people to
and it's a compounding effect of word of mouth as well. Like, that one person can go and tell 5 people, and those 5 people can go and tell their 5 people. So it's just got a massive compounding effect on top of that. And just we're running up to an hour now, so I wanted to wrap it up. I don't know if anyone else has a question in the chat. I've got one through just before we wrap up, and then we can obviously go off into the separate rooms. But we had a question from YouTube actually that says, was this game entirely done in Blueprints, or does it have a mix of code too? So did you have any C++ support on the project, or are you just trying to get all Blueprints in the game?
It started off as Blueprints only, but then we realized that it's probably going to be better to have a C++ code. It's probably going to be better to have a C++ coder in addition, which is when we brought Graham on, and he's refactored a lot of the code into C++. So you can do it in Blueprints, although, but where possible, you probably should do it in C++.
Yeah,
it's just more efficient.
Yeah, just to touch upon that point, because when it comes to things like launching on Switch and launching on Xbox, if you have made a game in Blueprints, that's fine, but you're going to find that if you can do that conversion rate into C++, the game's just going to run so much more smooth because, Blueprints, I think it's 0.5 of a second it takes to perform an action, whereas code can take something as small as 0.2 effectively. And, when you just add up all that time, it just makes your life so much easier.
Cool. So I'm sure Simran and Chris will be, on the Discord if you want to follow up. I really appreciate you. I'm sure everyone does in the chat, taking your evening. It took us a couple of hours to get set up as well. So thank you both for your time this afternoon. Is there anything you wanted to kind of say as a departing, like anything that people can kind of follow of what you guys are currently up to?
Yeah, so we've got some exciting stuff on the way, some more future content coming from Otterman. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, you can just find us on Twitter at TryHeartInt or Facebook, TryHeart Interactive. But yeah, big thank you for everyone who's come out. This is our first time ever showcasing game off digitally at a presentation like this, and thank you, Pete, for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same. I just hoped you got something out of it. Yeah.
Cool.
We're very thanks for having us.
All right, thank you both. So I just wanted to jump into the last bit. I promise I'm wrapping up now. So a bit of housekeeping. I promise all these talks have been uploaded. I appreciate that I may not have uploaded them yet. It's just been a bit busy. So I will make sure they're uploaded for all the previous things. We've had many speakers talk at the meetup, so be sure to check out for them. And the easiest way to stay up to date with everything is through our meetup page. So I appreciate people can't click these links in the PowerPoint. I will be making these resources live, but also through the YouTube link, you should be able to see a few things there. And also, if you just search Unreal Engine Meetup Manchester. You'll be able to find it there. So I've got some Google Forms in there if you want to submit a talk. If you want to talk at the next meetup, just drop them in there. You may have seen the banner throughout the stream, and the next meetup will be on Tuesday, the 15th of September, same time, and they're GMT times in case you're watching not from the UK. And we will be hosting Lord Zero. Now that's to be confirmed. If any of you are aware of who they are, that's Osman and Tom Lumen. They previously were at Guerrilla Games, then they went to Epic Games, and they've set up their own thing. So I'm sure a lot of you may have seen their work in progress and the stuff that they're working on Twitter. Tom has a few tutorials as well. So that should be a really informative thing. So thank you for checking out this stream. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your evenings. Really hope it was informative, and we'll make sure we just keep putting talks out and small tips and tricks. We'll make sure the resources are all shareable. And so for the YouTube people, I'll leave a small trailer going as we close the stream out, just from previous meetups that we've done in person. It's a fun little trailer we put together. And for the people on Discord, hopefully we have the separate chat rooms organized and you can all just chat and talk and catch up. And thank you all for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting it on.
Nice. It's actually our video.